And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it, and that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon. Today we're joined by my guest, Dee. Dee, thanks for being here.
That's a pleasure, Brandon. Thanks so much.
Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself before we get into it?
Yeah, I run a Substack called It Can't Be People, which addresses events occurring around human-made crop circles that really do sort of enter into the paranormal and high strangeness and overlap with ufology. And I've been interviewing circle makers, human circle makers over the past 8 years and just collating their accounts, which I then put for free on my Substack. It'll probably be a book at some stage, but in the meantime, it's garnering a lot of interest because people don't really understand about this element of the mystery.
Right. Crop circles has been something that's interested me for years, even as a little kid. So this is something that I've been looking forward to talking to you about.
Yeah, that's mutual. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we probably started from the same place, mate, because my interest is ufology, and I was brought up in the golden age of like Jacques Vallée and John Keel
Mm-hmm.
and Jenny Randalls and John Spencer, all of the 70s and 80s, really great literature. And when we started to see, we had UFO casebooks over here where every year you'd have details of sightings relevant throughout the world and throughout Europe and the UK. But then we started to see reports of these crop circles. And in those days, they were very, very simple single circle events, or they were just single circles with maybe satellite circles around them that looked like UFO landing gear from like the day the Earth stood still or a B movie. They all looked like landed vessels, okay, and the polemic and the reports were reported as such. They did look like landed UFOs, and the precedent was the tally nests from Australia in the 70s that looked like landed UFOs, but that was in grass because we were having them in crop because the crop's higher, the indentations were more pronounced. And then the polemic changed in about 1990, where we saw the now legendary Led Zeppelin remasters cover, which I'm sure you know about, which was more like a corridor with interlocking circles and forks and door keys. Now, at that point, the landed UFO polemic should really have just been obliterated because no UFO looks like that. But because the imagery and the connection between UFOs and crop circles had become so ingrained within the public psyche, we had this clunky transition where people said, well, that's not a landed UFO. It's a message from our space brothers instead, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. Well, if you would like to dive into what you've researched, I'll turn it over to you. And then if I got any questions, I'll ask as we go along, but I try not to interrupt people too much.
No, mate, really, that's fine. I've done loads and loads of these things, and that's the best way to do it. I understand the reason why I have to remain anonymous today is because there's three reasons. The first reason is that crop circle making is illegal in the UK. It's not actually a criminal police matter, but it's a civil suit if the farmer chooses to take, action because it's criminal damage. No matter no matter how pretty the circle is, it's criminal damage, it's trespass, and it's vandalism. and there's no statute of limitations in this country. So even though I retired from making 10 years ago, if I get linked to a circle, I could still potentially be in trouble. The second reason is this isn't about the personalities and the circle makers themselves. It's more about the stories and the anecdotes and the accounts speaking rather than the artist. And we prefer for it not to be about personalities, and we prefer for the art to be speaking. The third reason is this is a highly, highly contentious viewpoint or avenue that well, it's not a viewpoint, it's actually how things are. It's a highly contentious narrative I'll be giving you today. And I have a wonderful life outside of this. And I don't really want that to be encroached on upon people that don't really follow what the narrative is. Now, my belief was always in, as I said, ufology. And when I started to see these crop circles appearing in the case books, I didn't realize how close Wiltshire, because that's where they were appearing. I didn't realize how close Wiltshire was to where I lived in London. And when I did realize, I just got in the car and just drove down and started to visit these things. Our sort of Bible at the time, and still is the Crop Circle Connector website, which tells you where the events are and where the circles are. And I imagine that I'm probably where a lot of your listeners are, in that I always thought that this was some sort of NHI, or it was something connected to UFOs, or to military testing, or to Gaia, or to Mother Earth. We didn't for a second consider that they were human made, because the ones that we did see that were human made were normally really wonky and really badly done. And I'll come on to why that is soon. So if I was to go and do a field trip and visit 10 circles, if I knew that 2 of those were man made, I just wouldn't bother. Okay. I held the circle makers in the same contempt that I'm sure that some of your listeners will hold me, and that's fine, okay? Because we thought the mystery was deep enough without these pranksters and these hoaxes coming in and just muddying the waters. I always use the analogy of the magician with the balls under the cups. You know, there's 3 cups, 1 ball, and then these idiots come and add another 10 cups. So I visited the circles. But the more and more I went to visit Wiltshire, I started to hang about where the circles were made, and I used to go to the gift shops and the related places like Avebury and Stonehenge, all these ancient, really special sites. And I started to hear stories from human circle makers, who, as I said, I had complete disdain for. But I started to hear stories of strangeness. I was hearing stories of like time shifts and UAPs and uh, dream-driven events, intense synchronicities, and stuff that was all going around the creative process. And then I was overheard one day saying, "I don't care how the circles got there. I'm more concerned about what they do, i.e., the magic that they instill into the land and the people that report all these wonderful experiences." And I was overheard saying that, and the circle maker said to me, "Look, we've been watching you for a while. We think that you're probably aligned to what we're doing. We started a circle last night, but we didn't finish it. Would you like to come out and do the rest with us?" And of course, I jumped at it. But I did promise myself that if I didn't encounter any of the paranormal or really odd stuff that I'd been hearing about and reading about, I probably would put it all down to lies and fabrications and people padding their part. And I promised myself I would never do it again. Now, we went into to finish this circle, and nothing happened at all. And I thought, okay, this is all a bunch of BS. It's just these people, fabricating, making themselves look big. They're just hoaxsters. It's not the real phenomenon. It's just a waste of my time. And we finished the circle. And the second that we finished it, I saw this single, like, magnesium flare at the end of the field, which looked like an old Polaroid flashbulb from one of those old cameras. And I was very paranoid because I'd, as I do now, a quite responsible job. And I just said to the team leader, I said, people are taking pictures of us. We've had, and it was becoming daylight. It was about 3:15 by this point. Um, I said, we've had it. They're taking pictures. But that, this is going to go, I'm going to get a criminal record now. It's going to affect my job. And he went, no, don't worry. And I said, what do you mean? He was really blasé because he'd made loads and loads of circles. And then I watched this flash and it kept appearing. And then this flash turned into, it proliferated into 5 flashes, then 10, then 15. And then it was like 30 of these like magnesium flares, like UAPs at waist level, which I'd never seen before in the literature. And it sprinkled itself around the circle from the left and right round the circle. So we had this proliferation of lights, which I describe in my Substack as the biggest necklace in the world. And I said to the team leader, what the hell is that? And he says, look, that's just us being told. It's a little round of applause. We're being told that the circle's finished and not to do anything else to it because we might mess it up like a painting where you do too much. And then he looked up at the sky and he said, okay, we're finished now. It's yours. It's all yours. What that means is that for as long as we're making a circle, it's ours. But the second we leave it, it doesn't belong to us anymore. And he said, okay, we're going now. Thank you very much. And the second he said that, these lights just went off. Every single one. The whole thing was like someone had switched a light switch. And that's when I became hooked. And then the second time I made a circle, we had a pink UAP appear just as we did the first stomp mark. And it appeared for the duration of the circle and then blinked out once it finished. Now, that's when I started to become hooked and I started to make them regularly. And strangeness didn't happen every time, Brandon. I mean, every circle would be eventful. Something funny might happen or something amusing. But as far as high strangeness, I only had it about 40 to 50% of the time. But every time I did, it was really, really odd. And that's the message that I'm trying to put across. I'm trying to say to people, don't disregard human circles because there is a high strangeness element, especially when they're placed in these very, very old, ancient Neolithic and megalithic sites like Stonehenge and Avebury, where our forebears have been created, thousands of years before us.
Those places that they've been creating them at, like you mentioned, Stonehenge, those sites obviously meant something to the ancient peoples that built them in the first place. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes deeper than that. I mean, I'm not sure how you are aware of how much you are aware of Jacques Vallée's work, but he basically says that what we now report as UFOs were being reported as fairy lights in medieval times
mhm.
and religious lights before that. Whatever it is that is here in this area, Brandon, has existed with us probably since our inception. And I think that our forebears were far more tapped in to whatever it is that we've now forgotten because of our technocratic age. And I think that um, we've just inherited the work of our forebears by mistake. None of this is by design. Whereas where they were building in stone and rock and those things have like existed for 4,000, 6,000 years, our things are like temporary temples that only exist for a couple of weeks before they're cut out by the farmer. But it is interesting that when I do collate these strange reports from circle makers, they too tend to dissipate the further that I get away from the key Neolithic sites. And I've spoken to Italian artists and French artists, and I've said to them, I'm looking for strange reports for my Substack in this book. And Brandon, they haven't got anything at all. There's no strangeness at all. It just seems to be collated to where our ancient ancestors were doing the same sort of thing thousands and thousands of years ago.
I've often wondered when it came to crop circles because over here in America, when I was growing up, everyone said, "Oh, they're man-made. People did it. There's not anything about it." You get some of these really in-depth looking ones, like it. The thought of a person creating them in a matter of a few hours just didn't seem realistic, just because of how intricate the designs were. But I think you guys have them over there in the UK too, that are very like highly detailed ones. And obviously, when someone did it, you're going to have the people that jump on the bandwagons and they go make their own and everything else. But there are instances over here where they've been found with weird traces of radiation.
Yeah, there's two things to consider there. Firstly, when they started to become more and more intricate in the 90s, and as the artists got better and better and better, and they got onto like the fantastic stuff that was happening from about sort of 1992 onwards,
Mm-hmm.
I always thought, same as you, how the hell can two? Because we had this thing of like Doug and Dave, where we had these two old guys that come and confess to the whole thing. There's certain questions I've got about that whole episode. So we had this trope then. Oh, it's a couple of piss blokes coming home from the pub. Now, what you've got to consider is that when you see a really bad crop circle, okay, it's probably a new team starting out, okay, and they haven't got a clue what they're doing. And I always equate it to Nirvana, sort of Nirvana when they started, they could rehearse in the garage and not be seen for 6 months and just make as many crap notes as they could be rubbish, but they don't go out and play live until they're ready. Whereas with crop circle teams, we don't have that luxury. You're rehearsing from day one. So people are saying, well, that's obviously, a man-made circle because it's really, really terribly done. But that same team, when they get better, they'll be making circles that people think aren't made by people 2 years on. Now, when I went out to do my first one or help on the first one, um, you then become aware of. I couldn't do it the next day, but I could see how it was done. Okay, so it's this thing where you scale up. I've been out in 15, 20 man teams, and they've all known they've all known what they were doing. Okay, now as far as the radiation's concerned, I've tried to get. I've tried to. I mean, you've got all these. You've got this a lot of pseudoscience that the research community hide behind because the research community don't want you to know that it's people because it goes against the money making narrative. So we have reports of radiation, although we don't know if they've actually measured radiation from outside the formation as well. It could be within the whole field. Okay, when you look at the papers, there's a lot of ambiguity in them. And then you've got the bent, not broken argument. People say, well, in real crop circles, the crop is bent, not broken because of the weight of the boards. But again, that is kind of pseudoscience because when we actually create in the evening, the crop is very moist, so it does tend to bend rather than break. And when you go into a crop circle the next day, it's like CSI. It's like a crime scene. It's literally a crime scene in that it's criminal damage. But also, if you don't get in there before anyone else, and you start seeing a load of mess and footsteps and broken stems, what you're seeing there is not the work of the team, you're seeing the work of the all of the 100 or 200 people that have been in there before you that have visited it in that morning, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for me, it's just, I guess, without, you obviously can't answer, but like, why did they start doing it?
Yeah, see, this is where I'm quite passionate. This is where the real mystery lies for me, because as with ufology, you get report. I'm deeply rooted in ufology, and you've probably heard about the tendency if someone's a believer, they're more likely to see a UFO than if they're not.
Right. Yes.
It's not misappropriation, and it's not a mis-ID. It's just it seems to be, Brandon. I'm not sure where you are with the phenomenon, but I've studied this for like 40 years, and I've gone away as a lot of key ufologists have. I went away from the extraterrestrial hypothesis about 10 or 15 years into my studies. I don't think that it's ET. I think that it's something that masquerades as ET, and I think it's something that's coexisted with us and has been tracking and metamorphosizing itself based on where we are technology in the forms of technology. And I think it's been with us since our inception. Now, to answer your question, we think that there is something else going on in that we're not circle makers. Human circle makers are not we're not chosen or anointed or special in any way, but it just seems to be that we if a person does have an affinity towards the paranormal and ufology and spiritual things, it just seems to be that we become more aligned with the phenomena and then we attract the phenomena. Okay, so we don't know. We think that those original single circles from the 80s, we think that a lot of those were mysterious. We don't actually know what they were because the crop was bent upwards at like 2 or 3 inches sometimes, which can't be done by a board. But certainly anything sort of post 1990, which is the pictograms and all the calendar stuff that you like, that's arguably all man-made. But nobody really knows where the genesis comes from or where the inspiration comes from. And the bit that I'm interested in is that the fact that people can go and make a crop circle and then somebody else has already been there and made that exact pattern. Or somebody, as happened with me once, we went to make a crop circle and it was supposed to be swallows. And then as soon as we got to the field, because you start at 10 o'clock, you've got between 10 and 3 o'clock to get it done because you've got 5 hours of darkness. When we went to the edge of the field, our crop circle leader kind of had a spasm in his car. He went bolt upright and looked straight ahead and said, "No, it's spirals now." So I said, "Well, we can't do spirals. We've been rehearsing swallows all day." He said, "No, it's got to be spirals." And then we made this crop circle, and then literally an identical circle was made that same night, like 14 miles away. And that's where we start to think why and what else is going on. And then we get dream driven events where um I had a situation where I was having this recurring out of body experience dream where I was swooping over two fields in Wiltshire and there were two massive crop circles in these fields. And I was having a dream, and this guy that I used to go to school with was in my dream every time. But this guy from school, I hadn't thought of him for 40 years. So I'd wake up thinking, God, it's that dream again. And by the way, what's my school friend doing there? And then one day I took a wrong turn when I was in Wiltshire. Now, when you say wrong turn or mistake, that in our world is different, to what most people sort of attribute it to.
Hmm.
It seems to be that wrong moves and mistakes seem to be kind of engineered. So I took this wrong turn, and I found myself looking at these actual two fields that had been recurring in my dream. And I looked to my left, and I saw that the name of the road that I turned down was the same name of the road that my school friend lived in when I used to go around his house to play 40 years ago. And I thought, well, that's weird. But it spurred me to say, well, you need to do something. So I didn't have the wherewithal or the amount of people to do those two circles. So I decided I was going to do one of them. And I phoned my partner, I phoned the team. I said, look, we've got a choice of two. They're completely different. And it was like all the way through to the field. We couldn't decide what to do. And then in the end, I just kind of Luke Skywalkered it and just let my mind empty. And I thought, whichever stump goes down first, that's the circle I'm going to do. And then so we finished one circle. And then the next day, I got a phone call from my partner in London, and she said to me, "Crush, you were busy last night." I said, "Yeah, we got one of my circles down from my dream." And she said, "Well, no, you didn't. You got both down." And I said, "No, we didn't. We got one down." And she goes, "Well, you better go online." So in those days, it was before Wi-Fi, so you had to drive to the nearest place with the internet. So I found this internet cafe, and I found an aerial shot, and it had my crop circle in one field, and then there was this stripe. Now, what that stripe was this massive hill where it was like I couldn't see what was going on the next field because we had this massive hill. So we had my field with my circle, then this stripe, And in the next field, which was obscured from me, my other crop circle was in there. So aerially, it was exactly as it occurred in my dream. And we didn't know about that team, and they didn't know about us. Now, I don't know to this day if, when all this strange stuff occurs, whether it's the species field and we are somehow unconsciously, you know, in telepathy with the other team, or if there's something else at play and we're somehow being played, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. You think, and this is kind of hypothetical, you've mentioned
Yeah.
there's, you believe that there's something with these things from that's been here the whole time, like not ETs in general, but from doing my show, I've talked to a lot of people here, and a lot of things anymore, especially when it comes to aliens, and it depends on, they take it to a religious aspect, and
Yeah, I know.
I
I
try
know.
to avoid that, but they believe these ETs are demonic, and then a lot of people think the same things. But if you go back through history, as you mentioned before, there's a lot of stories, especially through Europe, of faith folk. And if you come over here to America and you talk to the Native Americans, they talk about the spirit realm, the spirits they had, their ancestors. And there's also little legends, these other like things. I've always said, what if it's all one and the same? We all interpret it differently, but a lot of the things are based off of something that's always been here.
I'm 100% I'm 100% with you. The only thing that I'd say that throws a spanner in that works, but only a slight small spanner, is that I think that it is down to our interpretation. So whereupon now we will see, you know, abductions with abductions from greys, the Fey folk, or sorry, our ancestors in medieval times would call that away with the fairies. So the fairies would take them away, and then they come back changed. There'd be missing time. They come back what they thought was what they think is 2 days later, but it's years later as far as the locals go. So I am with you 100%. But my one thing that I'd add to that is that what if this, whatever it is, this NHI or this ancient, whatever it is, what if it is deliberately projecting itself in a way that we then interpret it as something which is just beyond our capabilities? So if you look at perhaps the airship sightings from the 1890s, which were UFO sightings, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Yes.
People were reporting those as, you know, before airships were a thing. Okay, so it just seems to be that this thing is placing itself just beyond where we are in terms of technological maturity and where we are within our religious mindsets. And I've always been very curious about the fact that it wasn't until 1947 with the Mount Rainier sighting, and that was just 2 years after Hiroshima. It seems to be to me and to a lot of ufologists that we have somehow, through our messing about with nuclear energy and Hiroshima, and it just seems to be that perhaps we've affected. There's been ripples from our time, ripples from our plane, if you like, that have rippled into theirs, and then they have to manifest themselves as a way of sort of trying to control us. I've always thought it was really interesting that Kenneth Arnold did not report fly. I repeat, he did not report flying saucers. He reported 9 crescent-shaped craft which moved as a circle would do if you skipped it over water. Why, Brandon? Why did we start seeing flying saucers?
That was,
You see what I mean? It seems
yeah.
to mold itself based on what we expect to see. Do you understand?
I've always thought, after I figured out the Kenneth Arnold thing, and I've interviewed someone else who's done a lot of research into that too, that it was almost a way for them to control the narrative. Like they started pushing out flying saucers through the media and everything, but the original version was he saw these crescent
Yeah,
moon-shaped
yeah,
things, and flying saucer
yeah.
now became synonymous with UFO sightings. Like
Yeah.
everyone's
Th-
seen a
This,
UFO, they saw
this is
saucers.
This is why I think there's some sort of manipulation going on. But it also relates to things outside of ufology. I mean, why don't we see ectoplasm anymore? Why is it? And in ufology, where did the Nordics go from the 50s? Why are we seeing different types of aliens based on as we get progressively more scientific? I think that, as you say, I did an interview with a Faye uh, podcast a few months ago. It's one of the best I've done, and he aligns with everything you just said. It's just something which has pre-existed with us since our inception and manifests itself based on where we are, and that goes for ufology. It goes for everything which we see as paranormal. And I see parallels between the crop circles and ufology, which spread out through the whole paranormal world. We are just kind of, especially with the especially with the synchronicities that we get, where you think, there's some sort of engineering involved, where we call it a game of chess, but we're not playing it. We're the pieces, but we don't know. You know, um, and the thing with the synchronicities is you just could not engineer them. I mean, we had a situation where we were going to make a crop circle, and it was a team of six, and it was like a social event, really, because we only get to meet each other once a year. So we said, let's get this crop circle down, and it was like a celebration of Mother Earth, and it was going to be brilliant. And we'd all worked together before, and it was going to we had a social. We had a couple of pints at the pub. Didn't get drunk, obviously. You just have a couple of pints over a couple of hours. You talk about what you're going to be doing in the circle, because you get like the people that measure it out. You get the inexperienced people stomping the stuff down, and then they go into lead their own teams and blah blah blah. They get better and better. And anyway, what happened was there were six people. We all knew each other. And then one of us got a phone call, and he went, "Oh shit! I've just got a text. I've forgotten. I'm on another team tonight. I promised myself last year." So we lost him, and then somebody else said, "Oh shit! You know what? I'm on that team as well." So we lost him. So we were down to four. And then by chance, somebody phoned up a friend and said, "Oh, I'm in the area." And we said, "Get your ass down here. We need." And basically, somebody else left and said, "I've got a family matter." So we were one down, and then somebody else came in just by chance. So to cut a long story short, the six people that went out were completely different to the six people that were supposed to be there in the first place. Over the course of an hour, the whole thing just changed. Okay, like chess pieces. So we had six different people in there. So we were in the car, in the SUV, and we realized that we didn't know each other, which was crazy because, we were just strangers to each other. So it was a bit of an uncomfortable silence. And then one guy said, if my mum knew what we were doing tonight, she'd be so proud, because she was a spiritualist, and she'd be really into what we're doing. And I said, well, you can bring her down next year. And he went, "Well, no, because she passed away last year." And then I said, "My mum passed away last year." And then it's like Spartacus. Everybody in the van said the same thing. And then like there's like shiver went through us, because we realized that we both had this same loss within like 12 months. And then we realized that we were making a crop circle, which was a celebration of Mother Earth. And that's when that's when my brain starts to boil, where you're going, what is going on? Do you understand?
Like the similarities and the synchronicities.
Yeah.
It just made me start thinking of something. And what, like when you've made circles, what determines the design you're going to make? Is it just something that someone says, "Hey, I want to make this one"? Is there a significance as to why? Because,
Well, if you'd have asked me that before I started to make them, I'd have said, well, I've got a different answer now. And that is, firstly, we've got to consider this one thing. The circle making season is between sort of May and early September, if you're lucky. Now, the first couple of circles are normally made in that horrible canola yellow stuff. It's really hard to bend. The stems are like broom handles. And it springs up. And then you start to get the decent stuff. You start to get the barley and the wheat, and that's the stuff that stays down, and that's the stuff that, where you see the great circles. So we've got from September until kind of March to, work out what we're going to do. So what you think is sometimes your idea. You go to the field, and then you speak to, because the crop circle community isn't as close knit as you think. There's separate teams, but sometimes you'll say, "Well, we're going to make this circle," and then someone will say, "Well, you've nicked that from so and so because he's doing that this year," and then somebody else has got the same thing. And so the answer to your question is, what you think is like an original inspiration. Sometimes it gets back to exactly what we're talking about, where why are three people having the same idea?
Hmm.
And why is that theme there for that year? And then sometimes what will happen, Brandon, you get back to this mistake thing, right? Where you go to make a circle in a particular field, and then you can't get to that field because there's a roadblock or there's a flood, any whatever. And then as a compromise, because you're all in the car and you go, well, we can't actually arrange to meet for another week or two. We've got to do something. The team leader will say, "Look, let's just do it here, okay? Let's just do it here instead." And then you find out that that compromised location has a direct significance to the image that you've put in that particular field, because it's significant to the date or it's significant to something in the area. So again, you think, what's going on? You know, so you think it's your idea at the time, and then you find out that another three people have had the same idea.
I've wondered, and I don't remember if I read this somewhere, if I watched a show, or I heard it on a different podcast, but someone was hypothesizing that these things are, which I think they were more still on the side of their ETs doing it, but these things were supposed to be some sort of ancient sigils, or
Sigils, yeah,
they
yeah,
were supposed to be
yeah,
like for rituals for summoning things, and but they weren't talking about people doing it. But
yeah.
if you take that
But
aspect to it, people are doing it, and you just mentioned like multiple people having the same
mm,
idea,
you
maybe
see,
it
the
is
thing is,
something
Brandon,
connected to it,
it,
to where you're all making the same thing because it
yeah,
is like a ritual, like a
mm,
ritual
mm.
that you're all connected to it.
See, I know that your listeners are going to be disappointed to find out that it's humans, okay? But what
Hmm.
I'd say to that is that if you just, where I used to think it was ET or nature spirits or Gaia, when I found out that it was people, I was really, really angry and annoyed, because I thought, I've wasted 10 years of my life studying this thinking it's ET. And I was really angry for about 10 minutes, because I was down in the area when I found out, when the scales fell from my eyes and I realized what was going on. I was annoyed for 10 minutes. And then I thought, hold on a minute. If you actually include or put humans in here as a component, all of the other stuff is still there. Okay. So by having the humans in here as just a component of a bigger mysterious picture, it actually makes birthed UFOs look quite boring. It means the mystery is 1,000 times deeper than you think it is. And when we do a circle, what you're saying is true. It is a sigil, but maybe we don't know it is. We just had the idea, inverted commas, and then we find out that that particular image is of massive significance to where we've placed it. And
Hmm.
we think that the work of our forebears, who, I'll say it again, we're living in a technocratic age now where we've forgotten everything spiritual and all of this knowledge that our forebears had. We just think that the circles act as sigils to, like, reboot the energy that's already there. Okay. And it's like, because we've got the highest concentration of ley lines in Europe, in Avebury, and it just seems to be that they're like jump leads, if you like. They're like batteries. And the reason why we make crop circles look as if they're not man-made, because people put iron filings in them, and they'll do everything they can to make it look as if it's not people, is because when people think it's people, there's no magic instilled into them. Okay. They need to be seen as being not man-made for them to have the effect on people. Now, people say to me, well, in that case, why the hell are you on these shows telling people that it is people? And that's because we've had 40 years of this now, okay? And we've had 40 years of pseudoscience, and what we're saying is if you put us into the equation and you think of us actually instilling sigils into an ancient, already magical area, the mystery is far deeper than you think it is. And there are strong parallels between this and ufology as well.
Not to try and connect that into what ancient people has done, but I can't think exact. I know it's in South America. I think it's maybe Peru, the Nazca lines.
It's the
Yeah,
Nazca lines. Yeah. Now the Nazca lines are see, it depends on how deep you want to go, but I mean, I've heard people say that they are actually portals, and we've got a band in our country called Killing Joke, and they're a band very much drawn by numerology. All their songs are based on certain mathematical sigils themselves, sort of thing. And the singer, Jazz Coleman, actually went and stayed within the abdomen of the spider within the Nazca lines, and he says he's convinced that it's that they are portals. So there are strong parallels between the Nazca lines, and what we're doing as well. We think.
there's a lot of places that are supposedly like very high energy. Like there's Sedona, Arizona here in the States that people claim that they go out there and they feel like there's portals there. And then there's other locations. I know the TV show kind of blows it out of proportion, but there's Skinwalker.
Skinwalker.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
claim there's something to do with that. And there's these high energy areas. So I'm wondering, maybe these things are always there. And for some reason, unknowns to you guys, that you're being drawn in to do these sigils, these crop
Mm,
circles,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah,
that's just something
I'm
that
with you.
pulls you to it without explaining it, other than the fact that, like, what made them make these big designs in Peru that no one could see unless you're in the air. And back when they made them, no one would have seen them. There shouldn't have been anything in the air, but they were compelled to do something like that. Just same thing with like stone, like all these different megalithic things too, is what caused people to do that. And I've thought this with pyramids over the time. Like, why were the ancients across the whole world, in China, Egypt, South America, they all were building like these pyramid, like we evolved to,
Mexico.
yeah, we evolved to build these pyramids. Like the ancient peoples are building these pyramid type structures. But why was it across the whole world? How did they all know to build a pyramid? You'd think some things would be a little different here and there, but for some reason, at the same time frames or whatever, over a couple hundreds of years, they were building similar structures.
Yeah,
Again,
it also goes towards I mean, I'm not sure how true this is, but I think there's some weight to it. When John Logie Baird put in the patent for the television, apparently there were already two or three patents pending from people that had the same idea in other parts of the world that hadn't known about each other. So there's that implantation thing. But um, what you're saying is true, and when you talk about the compulsion thing, obviously what we're doing, once the circles are down, they only exist for a week or two before they're harvested.
mhm.
But sometimes I mean, when I started doing them, I mean, I'd be pulled. I've got a friend who was like pulled out of bed one night to do something. The compulsion was so strong. Um, and then you get other days where you think, oh, I'm definitely going to do it tonight because I've got a team. And then you don't feel like it. Or something happens and somebody has a family disaster or something, and then all right, I'll go out tomorrow. And then when tomorrow comes, then you feel absolutely drawn and compelled. You're pulled. And then you find out, oh, it had to be done on that date because that date is significant to the field we put it in.
Mhm.
So, so yeah, I had a situation. I interviewed what See, what the stuff I'm talking about, Brandon, is very hard to sort of scientifically sort of measure, because it's all based on the psyche. And I think that whatever this phenomena is, and in ufology, is actually deep seated within the human psyche. But where my interest lies is talking to. I spoke to a circle maker, and he said that he was in bed one night and he had this compulsion, as you say, absolute, overwhelming compulsion. At midnight, he woke up and he felt as if he'd been shaken awake. And he said, I felt like there was a presence in the room, like not like when you see poltergeist activity or ghost. He said, but there was no apparition. He says, but I just had the sense that I wasn't alone. And I had this compulsion to go and make a crop circle. It was midnight, and then but I thought to myself, I don't want to. I'm snug in bed. There's nowhere I'd less want to be right now than slugging away in a field. But this compulsion did not stop. But he said it wasn't pleasant. He said it was like when your cat wants feeding and it's not going to stop until you get up and get it food. He said it wasn't. There was nothing spiritual about it. He said he had to give in and get up. So he got the kit out of the car and he went and walked towards this field, which was ridiculous because it was like, sort of 1 in the morning and like, he's got his boards with him because you can't rustle up a team at that time of night. And anyway, he said he went to do this formation. He had this very clear image as to what he wanted to do in his mind. And he said he got bored of walking. So he went to this other field, which was similar to the one he was supposed to go to. And he said the second he got into the field, there was this nausea. He felt sick. He didn't throw up, but it was close to. He was really ill. So, and then when he come out of the field and sort of went, okay, I'll go to the other field, the nausea stopped. And then when he went to the actual field that he was summoned to, he started to make this circle, and because he was doing it by himself, he actually used tent pegs to do the measuring. Where normally you have to put a tent peg in the ground, and then take the tape out of that to do your measurements. And he said he got this circle done, and it was a little bit beyond his capability, but it was like as soon as he started to make it, he had this energy rush, and that's common if you look at the literature with circle makers. People get energy rushes, um, and he said he got the circle done, and he pretty much sort of dropped asleep on the spot about 3 a.m. And then the next day he woke up, and there was a group of girls freaking out, and they were in his circle, and they were going mental. They were going doolally in a really happy way, and he went up and walked up to them, pretending that he'd just fallen asleep under the tree and he just got there. And they said, "Look, look, look!" And he said, "Well, it's all to himself. He thought, well, it's quite a good circle, but it's not worth all the fuss they're making." And it turns out that they were pagans, Brandon. They were Wiccans, and they'd been meditating the previous night on getting this particular sigil down in this field, which was next to them. And but one of the girls was grappling round her neck, and she said, "This is it. We were meditating on it. This was what we meditated on." And obviously, the sigil was the same thing that he'd had in his mind to do. And that's where that's the bit that I'm interested in, where I'm thinking, what is going on? Is there telepathy between us and other people, or is there something else at play?
Mm-hmm. I just feel like there's some sort of connection with everything, especially with if you look at it from outside looking in, you hear the stories of the connections here, just even like throughout the years and everything else. I've always been saying here in the last year or two that I feel like everything somehow is connected, even with like the paranormal aspects to the UFO aspects to what people are reporting seeing these cryptid type creatures or whatever. There is
Do you
something
think?
at play, and I don't
Do
know
you
what it
think
is.
do you think it's strange that I mean you've probably been into the subject for as long as I have, all right, although I might be a bit older than you. When I was a kid, when I was like, talking to people about UFOs and Kelly Hopkinsville and
Mm-hmm.
all of the classic literature and like the Lenny Sakura event, uh my friends just thought I was mad. They just thought I was. But now they sort of say to me, you know, I think I saw something,
Right.
or they go, can you actually explain to me a little bit more about it? And it's like people seem to be much more receptive to it now, and there's a lot more sightings, and sightings to contradict what I'd said to you before. Sightings made by people that aren't believers. I just think there's been an acceleration or a concentration within paranormal activity and people's perception towards it over only maybe just the past 10 years. Would you agree with that?
I would, yes. I
But
th-
isn't that strange in itself, don't you think?
I wonder and I think I've mentioned this before on a different episode, but maybe it's because it's more mainstream now. It's being more wider accepted, but by also it being out there more people are becoming aware of it. And once you become aware of it, you're more susceptible to having an experience of something.
Yeah. I did an interview I did a really nice podcast interview a couple of months ago with the Oddball people, the Oddball Shop it's called, or the Oddity Shop, and what we said there was, but because we're talking today about, you know, a high strangeness environment, I crop circles being like a theatre of the strange. What a tendency that I might have is to actually equate strangeness with crop circles because it's within the crop circle environment. Now that could be a fault on my part because it could be that if you were to make a list of 10 weird things that happened to you in the week, just going about your daily business, okay, it could be the same as 10 days in the fields. It just seems to be that there are more people experience more in terms of synchronicities now. The thing about when you see us, you're in the street and then you see somebody and you think, God, I've not seen them for 40 years, and then you go, oh no, it's not them,
Mm-hmm.
and then you do see them half an hour later.
I think
Yeah,
it's almost like a deja vu type thing
yeah.
where
Yeah, I think people are connecting the dots more than they used to because there's more of a, like you say, it is more mainstream, but a mainstream phenomenon wouldn't necessarily result in genuine sightings, would it? It might result in mis-IDs or, misinterpretations, but I don't think a concentration in the mainstream would actually result in genuine sightings.
do you think whatever this is, like whatever people experience or see, do you think everyone interprets it differently just to what they are accustomed to see? And I mean this in the sense that, say, someone said they saw an alien, or someone said they saw a little person, like a fae folk, or someone claims they saw a Bigfoot. And all these things have the same instance where they just vanish.
Mm, mm.
Even like a ghost apparition, they saw an apparition, it just vanishes. Maybe our minds can only interpret what it's programmed or what they're projecting us to interpret it as. Like it projects whatever it wants us to think that it is, or we can only
There's
see it as a certain aspect of it.
there's three things I'd say to that. First one is that I've done a lot of. I know we touched on it before, but I have done a lot of Christian-based podcasts. Okay, where to them the interpretation of that they're convinced that what I'm talking about is demonology, and they
Mm-hmm.
think that I'm channeling really evil stuff.
Right.
Okay, but that's from their interpretation, and they're really nice people, and I'm not going to fall out with them. They've given me a chance to speak. They're really nice people. But the two other things I'd say is that I remember reading in the literature a long time ago that there was a particular sighting, and somebody said in the sighting, the aliens, or whatever they were, said, would you like, we are showing you us in our form now because it won't freak you out. Would you like to see us in our true form? Okay. Um, but the other thing I say is that I've got a friend and she had a ridiculous sighting as a child where she saw a UFO and then she saw like the Michelin Man, like the Pillsbury Doughboy, that this massive inflatable child thing walking towards her. And I said, Jay, that is the closest that your mind can get to processing what you've actually seen because it's so beyond, beyond anything you can actually mentally envisage that's the closest it can get, you know? So again, I think it's something which interacts with the psyche, which is what Gervais talks about, where it's something which is actually connecting with us on a very primordial ego mental level, rather than just this straight nuts and bolts black and white phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. I just There's really no definitive answer that I can come up with, and I'm no expert in anything, but I just believe that there's something more out there. And I know that's weird for people to hear in the sense that I don't try and put a religious aspect to it. I don't try and put any sort of paranormal aspect to it. I just feel like there's something, and I don't know what it is, but there is something out there that compels me to do what I do.
Yeah, it's the same with me. People have said to me, you know, you're bringing a lot of heat on yourself. You're bringing a lot of blowback on yourself by actually talking about the human aspect. And I just feel like I'm sort of kind of like compelled to do it. I've got no skin in the game. There's no, I'm not making any money out of it. And then when I do publish the book, I don't expect it to get rave reviews because obviously it's going against a lot of what the community think, or say they think. But it just seems to be that there is something which has always been. A lot of ufologists are going down this road now. They've turned away from the ETH and they're saying, is there everything like you say with the cryptids, Bigfoot, Loch Ness? What if it's all the same thing and it's just a question of our interpretation?
Hmm.
But I have to go back and say that I think the interpretation is there is a manipulative aspect to it where it presents itself and metamorphoses based on what it thinks we want to see or expect to see.
That's just, again, that's kind of where I align with it too. I mean,
A lot of ufologists, mate, a lot of ufologists, the ones that those of us that have been in the game for a long, long time, we're all going down this path now where we're saying it's not ETH, it's something a little bit, it's not outer space, it's inner space, it's a lot closer to home. And I like what John Keel says about if you think of the old radio and you've got the needle on the radio, and if you've got the needle slightly to the left, you'll hear a little voice from another station. If you interpreted that as being our own psyche or our own experience, it just seems to be that sometimes we do hear other channels. And he says that if the needle were wider, then we'd see a lot more. Unfortunately, where we are, our spectrum is so tiny of what we experience. It just seems to be that what we call the extraordinary now will just be the ordinary when we find out what's actually going on. And there's no such thing as the supernatural, it's just the natural. And we've had to put the super in it because we haven't worked out what the other stuff is yet.
we don't understand it yet.
We don't understand it. I love what J. Allen Hynek, who's the Godfather, together with Jack Valle, said when he was doing his studies. Even if the UFO problem, and I love the way he calls it a problem as well. He says if the UFO problem, if the solution was presented to itself, if the solution was presented to us today, black and white, we are not in a position where we'd even understand it. And I think because the phenomenon works on this level, this deep psychological level, and the thing I said about the mother crop circle, it's so advanced. And it's so advanced that we're not yet in a position within our evolution where we understand it. But I do think that our ancestors were. I think they got to the point where we are and become super, super, super advanced, and they're the key. It's our ancestors, the pyramid builders, everything you're talking about, the Stonehenge builders, the Avery builders. Um, that I think they were far more aware of this stuff than we are.
Yeah. I don't know if it's by design that we've been dumbed down to it, but I feel like the old generations of people were more in tune to what goes on around the world. And nowadays we're more involved with the technology aspect. It's kind of like we've lost what made us people.
Yeah, there's people. There's Brandon. There's people saying that we've actually been at this stage before, where we are now, and further in terms of technology and technocratic, you know, uh, things. And we've actually just gone back to the earth. We've
Mm.
gone back to the land, and we've gone back to spirituality, and that's where our there's an argument to say that our forebears, they had the technology to build this stuff is because they were far more technology advanced than we are now, but they chose to apply it to the land and their spirituality instead.
Yeah. I know I've talked with people and they can claim that they can explain how ancient people built things, and I'm not saying that they didn't. I know the TV show Ancient Aliens wants to put everything that aliens came down here and influenced building of these ancient structures, but
Yeah, and our crop circles. Yeah,
I don't necessarily agree with all of that, but I don't know. Like I said, I'm not an expert. There's just a lot of weird things out there, and for me personally, I just believe that it's all connected somehow. One way or the other, there's something that's influenced us to where we are today, and there's something that influences people to do what they do, and there's something that influences what people are reported seeing and experiencing. And I just feel like it's
yeah,
all one and the same.
yeah. But it's nice that you can, if you go in with no preconceptions, then that's the best way to go in. Because if you go in and you're tainted with one worldview, or you've got one agenda or another agenda, you will mold everything towards that. If you go in with a clean mind and a clean slate, that's probably, sometimes it's nice to go in with a place of no knowledge, and you might come out with more knowledge than somebody that knows a little bit more than you do, if that makes sense. It's a nice place to go in clean, and to go in with no preconceptions.
That is one of the things that I've been wanting to do is I try not to do a whole lot of research into certain things, especially if I'm looking into something. I know that sounds like counterproductive, but like you just said, if I was going to go somewhere and investigate an area, I wouldn't want to go in there knowing full well, like, this is what's supposed to happen here, because then you're expecting it. So,
Yeah.
are you going to get
Or you
disappointed because you don't get that experience, or are you going to manifest that experience because you think that's what's going to happen, so you manifest it to happen?
Yeah, the advantage I've got is that my missus isn't into any of this. She's not. She's completely stoic, and she's completely doesn't believe anything that I believe. And it's really good to have her as like a nice anchor, if you like. If I float too high, she anchors me down. So it's really nice to be married to somebody like that, because where I would look into a situation and think, "Oh God, you're so deep into it, you're just seeing this." She will look at it objectively, and I just a crazy situation. I mean, this is crazy. We had a situation once where a crop circle wanted to come out with me, and sorry, a novice, a fan wanted to come out. A crop circle fan wanted to come out and make a circle, and I went out with the completely wrong intentions. I went out with the intention just of ego and showing off and saying, "Yeah, I can do it." It was a totally wrong motivation. There was no spirituality involved in it. It was really all about me, me, me. It was a terrible decision. And we went out and we made this club circle, and he was fast. He was a young kid. He was really quick. He learnt really quickly. We got the whole thing done in about an hour and a half. And then at the end, he said to me, "Can I just put my little signature on it, a little flourish at the end?" I said, "Yeah, go for it. You've earned it. You've done a great job tonight." But what he did was he just put this single flourish on the circle, which completely changed the aesthetic. So it went from being pleasant and good vibes to something really bad. It looked like a scorpion's tail or something like that. It looked really, really bad. And that was a lesson to me. I thought that's what happens. And anyway, I got home, and then I was taking my missus to work one day. And you get those situations where you think, I'm driving really carefully, but I'm going to have a crash because there's a bus coming that way. There's a kid running in the road. Somebody's opened their car door. There's a bouncing ball. It was like being in a video arcade game. I said to the missus, I'm going to have a crash in a minute, even though I'm only going 15 miles an hour. Anyway, I've dropped her off. And sure enough, as soon as I dropped her off, this bloke come careering out of this driveway, crashed into my windscreen, smashed the windscreen. And I thought, I phoned the insurance people, and they said to me, "We can't get there until tomorrow." And I thought, well, I can't leave it because it's going to look abandoned. And just by chance, I happened to have parked in front of this bloke who did windscreen repairs. Anyway, he said, "I'll get you on the road for 100 quid." So I said, "I'll just do it." But he had those plungers. He had those suckers where you put them on the windscreen and then put them into the panel. But he was really bad at his job, and he was putting all these suckers wrong. Everything was really bad, and then he put the paint in, and then I drove off, and I was transfixed by looking at this windscreen, and I went, "No, you're being stupid. You're reading too much into it. It's not what you think." And then I picked up my wife from work, and she just got in the car, and she is, as I said, completely objective. She doesn't believe in any of this stuff. And she sat in the car. She sat bolt upright and stared at the windscreen. She goes, "What the hell is your crop circle doing on our windscreen?" And it was exactly as this guy had done the suckers. And it was exactly with this little scorpion tail as well. And that really freaked me out, that was like a lesson as to what happens when you do it for the wrong reasons,
Weird question, but do you and her ever have a moment where you're thinking something and she will say it like literally like within a few seconds afterwards?
Yeah, of course. But Sheldrake calls that the species field, doesn't he? And this is the only thing I'm not sure about with this subject with crop circles. I'm not sure if we are using that, dormant link that we don't know about, that little telephone line, or if our telephone lines are connected to another exchange, and the signals being like triangulated. So of course I get it. Everybody gets it,
Mm-hmm. So that happens to me and my wife often, and it's a little creepy every now and then because I'm getting ready to say something and she says it first. It's just like, are you reading my mind?
Yeah. Yeah, but as I said to you, I think in decades, hundreds of years to come, we won't be looking upon this stuff as being. We'll look at these times and call them primitive and say, "God, look how we were. We thought this was paranormal. It's really normal." I think it's because we are far less advanced than. I mean, technologically we're advanced, but I think mentally and spiritually, and in terms of accepting new paradigms and in terms of accepting new ideas, we're cavemen. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been going on for a little over an hour, so I figure we can get close to wrapping this one up. Before we do, is there anything you would like to touch base on?
All I'd say, Brandon, is thanks for letting me speak today, and also to the people that among your listeners that are tearing your hair out saying you work for CIA or MI5 or you're a disinformation. It's not the case. Even if you want to believe that some are done by ET or whatever, if you next time you look at a crop circle and you get in the mindset that it could be human, just think of it as being the humans are a component, and it's not a hoax. If a crop circle is made with intent or somebody's compelled to do it, it's not a hoax. There's something else going on. And if you want to look at my Substack, which is itcan'tbepeople.substack.com, that's free to join, and I update every week or 2 weeks with a new account from a new crop circle maker that I've spoken to, or one of my own experiences. And when I do interview crop circle makers, what's happening, this is very encouraging, is that I can't use a lot of the stories now because I've got so many, and the same themes are recurring again and again. So I'm getting the same stories recurring again and again from new stories, which tells me that, we're definitely onto something. And the reason why I call it Can't Be People was because that when I walked into my first crop circle, it was extremely complicated. I looked around and thought, it can't be people. But now I know that it is people, but there's something else that can't be people next to it, if that makes sense.
No, I totally get it. Well, D, it has been a pleasure, and it's been very informative, and I can't thank you enough for being a guest here today.
That's an absolute pleasure. Keep in touch, my friend, okay?
Yep. You have a great day.
And you, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. If you'd like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Make sure to follow me around on all the social medias. And just remember, truth comes at a cost. Are you willing to pay the price?
I heard a story late last night about something lurking along the wood line. Huge footprints, strange lights in the sky. They claim it's nothing, but I know they lie. It's easier to laugh in my face, but something about this makes me say, what if it's real? What if they knew? What if the answers are coming from you? Spinning stories, wasting my time, hearing voices, is it all in their minds? They can call me crazy, but I just want some proof. What if it's true? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. They see a dog man walking, or maybe a mothman flies above the buried giants, hidden beneath the lies. They say it's just stories, it's all make-believe, fairy tales for the things we can't perceive. They want to keep us blinded, they want to break our will, but I'm not buying it, I'm not swallowing another pill. Force-fed poison, the lies we're made to believe. What if the truth could set us free? Alien signals traveling through time, secret space programs erasing their minds. They call them crazy, but I just need some proof. What if it's true? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. They laugh, they lie, we all could die, but the signs are there if you open your eyes. Aliens, cryptids, demons, ghosts, the Nephilim too. What if it's me? Or what if it's real? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. It's all in our heads, it's all in our minds. These voices can't be silenced, the truth must rise. Tinfoil tales, it's pulling me through. What if it's real? What if it's true?